Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. 71-year-old Edward Wackerman is now facing several felony charges for allegedly igniting a massive wildfire in Yosemite National Park last July that was originally attributed to climate change. He was arrested and taken to custody on Friday after a year-long investigation into the fire, which destroyed 127 private homes, caused roughly 6,000 people to evacuate the surrounding areas, and burned through nearly 20,000 acres of vegetation. It took over 2,000 firefighters to extinguish the blaze at its zenith, and the flames weren't fully contained until early August of that same year, with smoke from the blaze traveling about 200 miles to the San Francisco Bay Area and to parts of Nevada. Officials from the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection reported that 3 firemen were injured during the response, although investigators have yet to provide the exact cause of the infamous Oak Fire. In the meantime, the district attorney in Mariposa County, California, is charging Wackerman with several crimes, including aggravated arson, arson that caused great bodily injury, and arson that caused damage to an inhabited dwelling. Eventually, we'll identify the specific cause, which by all accounts doesn't seem to be related to climate change whatsoever. Prosecutors believe this is a clear-cut case of arson. And if anything made this incident worse, it's the state and federal government's failure to properly maintain forested areas by removing dead trees and excess brush, both of which fuel uncontrollable wildfires in California each and every year. However, despite the arson theory, many media outlets prematurely attributed the fire to climate change in typical fashion, possibly because it's easier to gain political support for radical Green New Deal type policies when people believe the world is on the brink of collapse and is literally on fire. This narrative is not about protecting the natural environment. It's about expanding the nanny state and its control over our lifestyle without sparking fears or backlash about excessive government overreach. Perhaps this is why the Biden administration is trying to permanently extinguish the fossil fuel industry while giving alternative energy providers financial subsidies courtesy of the American taxpayer. This push manifests in several ways, such as the effort to build more solar panels and wind turbines across the country, regardless of the immediate or long-term environmental impacts. That brings us to the offshore wind turbines that are currently operating off the eastern coast of the United States, where the number of whale deaths is now mysteriously rising. For this reason, the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, will examine the environmental effects of offshore wind energy infrastructure in the North Atlantic region between the states of Maine and New Jersey. The nonpartisan congressional watchdog group will likely investigate 17 turbines in current operation and another 3,400 turbines that will be built off the coast of New Jersey, where Democrat Governor Phil Murphy has issued multiple executive orders to increase the state's wind energy production capacity. This inquiry follows some reported concerns from citizen organizations and from elected officials in Washington, some of whom are allegedly attributing 50 whale deaths off the East Coast since last December to the turbines in question. Moreover, 335 deceased whales have appeared on East Coast beaches since the year 2017. And while this uptick is considered to be highly unusual, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, says there's no evidence of these deaths resulting from wind energy devices in the ocean, but of course they'd say that. Joining us now to discuss is Kevin Diaratna, a senior research fellow and chief statistician for the Heritage Foundation. Kevin, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So it turns out another form of green energy is not so green, would you say?
Absolutely, and it's a great question. We've seen this time and time again with wind energy. For example, over the last 15, 20 years, we've seen, for example, wind energy be associated with bird deaths and bat deaths. And the question now is coming into the picture regarding marine life. And it's seriously concerning in terms of the potential devastation for marine life. But from a more overarching perspective, we've analyzed these policies in depth at the Heritage Foundation, and we found that these policies can come with significant economic costs and essentially negligible environmental impact, especially given that the whole goal is to avert the so-called problem of climate change.
So to that point, do these wind turbines, even if they're working at full capacity out there in the ocean, do they even produce enough energy? Are they likely to in the near future? Is it really even worth the cost of, as you said, actually causing some damage to our ecosystem?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and the answer is overwhelmingly there is no meaningful effect of these things.